Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. Real leaders challenge people, true leaders set people free. Jonas Riddlestyle. So Phil, what are your thoughts on this? Because there's an interesting thing about like leadership and management and that whole conversation around, what are we doing? Should I be tightly managing people? Do I actually set them free? Do I give them free rein? Do I make them work with the systems? When you see that quote, what do you think about when it comes to running and leading a phenomenal organisation?
I think it's a really good quote. I think from my perspective in leading people, one of the challenges is that obviously all people are all different levels and different diversities, and so many people are at different stages of, some people want explosive growth, some people want to become the absolute best version of themselves, other people seem to be stuck in this kind of pattern of just coasting along. But from my own personal perspective, from a leadership point of view, I feel it's my responsibility. I'm always just trying to get the best out of people. So my connection with every individual is, what can I do to help them to become the best version of themselves? And I think this quote, talks really well to that.
It's kind of like that old Michael E. Gerber, wrote The E-Myth, and in that he said that there was like 3 different things. It's like people that are operationally and tactically on the ground. Next level after that is then becoming the manager and managing the organisation, and then the next level after that is then becoming entrepreneurial. And I look at it like in my world, I'm very much tactical on the ground, operational, but I do no managing inside of my business. I have Carly, who's phenomenal inside my business, that does that function. And then I literally jump up into the entrepreneurial spaces, when we get our planning time and the rhythms to be able to pull up to that space. And it's really about that lesson is, when someone comes into my organization, I've had a head of marketing ring me once before and say, "Hey, Josh, what do you think we should do around this marketing idea?" And I said, "Well, it's not really my area of expertise. You're the head of marketing. That's exactly the reason why I've employed you. You do what you think you should do." And they kind of look at you a little bit weird that first time that happens, because they're expecting that as the business owner that you want to give all the answers to that. And I'm like, I'm not the answer, man. You're actually in charge of actually running that, and I'm going to give you full freedom. And initially it's quite scary for them, but later on it becomes absolutely liberating, because they're like, Josh has kicked the ball to me and just said, just run with it and do exactly what you want to go and do. And I love that as a concept. And so, down into our business, we've got a very clear strategic plan. And one of those strategies is KJT, keep Josh talking. So anything that's not me talking, I don't do in the business anymore. So, flights, cars, accommodations, sales conversations, whatever it is that we're doing, I'm only doing the coaching component, and I'm becoming the best in the world at doing that. That's absolutely my area, and I expect that everyone else in my business, my head of marketing, my head of sales, my head of operations, I expect that they're going to become the best in the world at doing that particular function in the business. If you can get to that point that you can set people free, it is absolutely liberating, because all of a sudden you've got people that are really, thinking and talking differently about how the business operates. Phil, we're going to talk today about, probably something that's one of the most important components inside of any business, and it's about like really getting a really clear, business plan, and actually getting a business plan that works. Most people are probably in a position that they pay homage to a business plan once every so often. It's the sort of thing that maybe they do a business planning day. We see that inside of a lot of organizations. And never again is the plan seen again, and nor is there any conversation around, what we actually do with it and how we measure it and what success looks like. And, I was looking at it the other day, and there's one thing that I was thinking about was the Formula One, right? And I was watching Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton out there on that racetrack. And what really struck me is that, in this race, that Max is out there and he measures his lap time, right? So he's actually in a position that he's going around the course in a minute. And all of a sudden he sees that Lewis Hamilton is behind him, and Lewis Hamilton's doing it in 50 seconds. And Max knows that that's a problem, right? Because if that happens over the course of the next 44 laps, that literally Lewis Hamilton's doing it in 50 seconds and he's doing it in a minute, like there is no way that Max Verstappen's going to win the race. And that literally, it really taught me that lesson that, if he knows that he's so far out in front, then he doesn't have to push as hard around the corners on a wet track when it's dangerous conditions. So literally, there's got to be something inside of a business plan. They've got a race plan, and I kind of think that's a very simple thing inside of a business. You've got to have a business plan. You are phenomenal in driving this, not only at a Harris level, then ultimately in your different service lines from property management to sales. and then down into the specific components around a salesperson and their teams and what that actually looks like. So talk to us about some of the things that you've learned, in business planning and what this subject actually really entails and how people got to take it seriously or not in order to have an enduring great business.
It's a great topic, isn't it? Because I think from my perspective, certainly my own journey, Josh, I'd say that business planning personally for me, as well as the company of Harris, that's been a real evolution. It's been really refined. What I would say is that over particularly the last 3 to 5 years, I would say that we have absolutely improved dramatically the way that we are using business plans. My experience from an individual perspective with salespeople is that most people who have a conversation with a salesperson, tell me about your business plan, normally they refer straight to KPIs as if KPIs are the business plan, meaning, next year I want to write a certain amount of fees that equals an X amount of listings and sales and appraisals and those sorts of things. And I say, KPIs form a part of a business plan, but they aren't the actual business plan itself. And so I think that the key takeaway for me is that there does need to be simplicity. But I think if you've got a high quality business plan that basically puts an endpoint destination of where you want to end up, but where a lot of people go wrong is actually operationally as well, is what are the activities that, as you said, keep Josh speaking, right, is one of your key themes. What are the key themes that need to be done on a daily basis that is actually going to enable you to in fact actually win. So from a salesperson's perspective, if you can get real clarity over where do you want to be, and I always like to think for salespeople, for me, is embarking on a 3-year journey. So thinking about where do you want your business to be in 3 years' time? What would that look like? What are the key milestones that need to be achieved in terms of how in fact you actually get there? And then operationally, what are the things that need to be done on a daily basis for you to in fact actually win? Now, I pulled out an old book that had been sitting on my bookshelf, I think, for the last 4 years or so. Josh, I hadn't read it. It was a book, I'm sure you would have read it, Atomic Habits, right? And inside that book, it was talking about the fact that, everybody's got goals, okay? Everybody has goals, but what's more important than goals is actually the system, in fact, of how you actually achieve that goal. So everybody goes to the Olympics and everybody who's on the starting line, everybody has the same goal, which is what? To win gold, right? But what separates people and actually the achievement is call it system, call it a process. And I think that, for me, when I was reading this going back only about a week ago, that's the analogy for salespeople, which is everybody starts out with the end goal. Oh yeah, I've got this goal, which I want to write 800 grand or $1 million. But the moment you go to talk about process, which is what am I actually going to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, that's where the industry goes to shambles. So I thought that was a really great analogy. Goals are great, but it's the system. You can actually, without having a goal, if you've got a great system, you can still achieve great things, but it doesn't work the other way around.
I think this whole conversation around simple is best. We've both advocated the whole conversation around having a one-page plan, which is ultimately that summary of all of the strategic thinking that goes on to create a great business plan. But there's a lot of work that goes on in the background to get to that one page. And you often look at a one page and you go, oh, okay, that looks pretty simple. Yeah, no, but it's all the thinking that we've done to get there. And I've seen a lot of go-wrongs, and one of my favourite ones was this lady by the name of Billy Kerrisk. And Billy was a phenomenal agent. She ended up becoming our changed agent of the year in New Zealand, the first year that we ever ran it. And Billy and I one day were sitting down, she's in Golden Bay, and she wants to go and write $1 million in fees. So we have a quick look at it about total size of market, and all she needs, Phil, is 200% market share. And that was the massive lesson for both of us at that point in time, right?
Some challenges there.
Yeah. And then, interesting enough, because when we spoke to Alexander Phillips, he would said, make sure that your marketplace is big enough for your aspirations. And the thing that I get is I hear a lot of agents that come in and go, oh, I've got 500, houses in my area, or I've got 1,000 homes in my area. And I actually don't think that that's the measure, because I say, well, how many sell every year over a 10-year average? Because the number of transactions that happen in that area every year over a 10-year average is more important than just the number of houses in isolation. And sure, there's a relationship between both, right? In a new and establishing area, and percentage of that are going to turn over is low. Get to year 6 or 7, it's probably going to be higher, when you're in a greenfield site. But you do need to understand about how many sales actually happen regardless of the market circumstances of the day. Because if you've got 10% of 600 sales, you're doing 60 deals a year. If that market goes to 200 transactions a year and you still got 10% market share, then all of a sudden you're only doing 20 deals. And so there is definitely a relationship to market share penetration, and total size of market. What are your thoughts about some of that conversation when people are initially setting out, hey, what's possible for me? And then working out how am I actually going to do it in terms of organizational. So if you think about it, I think it was Turn the Ship Around, where, they spoke about that intent, organizational clarity, and then technical competence. So where are we going? What does that look like in terms of our intent? organizational, structure. What are the things that we actually need? People, systems, process, you get the idea. And then down at a technical competence level, what are the specific skills that we're going to need to learn to be phenomenal at prospecting, listing, auction, sales process, managing routines, arrears, managing a property management business based on income as opposed to total number of properties under management.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there in what you've just said, but we've just been through this with our sales team, establishing business plans for the upcoming year. And part of that, Josh, what I'm hearing you say is, really it's about confronting the brutal facts. So like so many salespeople they sit down to create these business plans, but reality is it's more of a wish list than an actual business plan. So just as you've suggested, to say, well, hang on, if I'm going to achieve a certain number, let's actually have a look at the actual reality, confront the brutal facts, which is, does my market even sustain the outcomes that I'm wanting to achieve? And just to take that another level deeper, Josh, I think for salespeople, we've even gone that one step further now. It's amazing how many salespeople don't even actually sit down to analyse their past 12 months' performance before we even start projecting, and what I mean by that is going, well, hang on, let's have a look. Let's just say, for example, last year you wrote 500 grand in fees, your average com was 10 grand, so you sold 50 properties last year, which resulted in writing 500 grand. A lot of people don't even understanding those basic numbers. But then if I said, if you sold 50 homes last year, Josh, have you actually identified where did those actual 50 sales actually come from in terms of the lead sources that you actually generated? So if I said, look, 10 of those listings of the 50 that you sold came from running open homes. Another 10 came from your core market of specialisation. 5 of those came from past vendors. 5 of those came from past sellers, whatever it might be. If you don't have that as a basic starting point for your business plan, how can you actually sit down and have a business plan that has focuses on lead generation to even contemplate what are you just going to randomly pluck numbers of where you're actually going to generate listings from? So I think kind of leading to the conversation you spoke about is getting real clarity before you start projecting into the future on what it is that you want to achieve. Understand the past, understand your business, understand the market that you're trading in. Now that we've got that information at mind, now let's start mapping out what our actual forward projections are and how we're actually going to move forward.
And this is like a really strategic review of the business of where it's been to actually get a projection on the trajectory on where it can go. And I look at it and I kind of ask 2 different questions on lead source. I'm like, okay, great. So how did you meet the seller and how did you jag the listing? And to me, they're 2 very different answers. So I might have met Phil Harris at an open for inspection, but I got his listing because I rang him every single time there was a significant listing or sale in his area. Or I met Phil Harris at an auction and I got his listing because I actually helped his brother buy a property. So and they're 2 very different conversations around what was the initial lead source, but what did I do to nurture that to the point it came to fruition?
And one really little quick tool for the guys that we use. So before we do any business planning inside our organisation, Josh, we have a very simple Excel spreadsheet that we email out to all of our team, and they simply have to go through and pre-populate. So number of properties they listed last year, number that they sold, how many appraisals, what their average sale price was, what their average com was, and then on next tab on that spreadsheet is they've got to go down and just do a breakthrough of exactly where all of those listings came from. So say, look, before we actually go and forward project and build out our lead generation strategies for what we're going to achieve in the next 12 months, just a little self-discipline to understand your business before we actually start moving forward.
And what I love about that is that then all of a sudden you're saying, okay, great, so what's actually worked? But how does that relate to where we've been spending our money and our time and our resources? So we did this with an agent in Sydney, and he's like, oh, mate, I've got 3 buyers agents in my team. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then we went through the 100 listings or whatever that they'd done, and not a single one actually came from buyer conversion. And I said, and that's crazy that you'd spend all of that money on that resource and you're not getting it because those people aren't asking that question.
Or someone puts down this kind of radical strategy, Josh, for this, for this next financial year. I'm going to get 25 listings out of my core market. And that's a really noble goal that you've put forward there. Tell me, how many listings did you get out of your core market last year? 1. Okay, so we're actually looking for a 500% increase or something. Is that actually realistic? No, that's a wish. That's not actually a business plan or a strategy. So understand it before we move forward.
And Alexander Phillips and I, we've had a look, and his numbers have obviously substantially grown from day one of doing 800 grand to 20 plus million now. And the interesting thing is that every year we still play with the same 3 numbers: average sale price, volume of transactions, and average fee dollar-wise. So what can we do to trick that up? And so ultimately, when the sellers sell, where do they move to? when the buyers buy, where do they come from? So we can actually understand literally the before, core, and after markets. And that's a really interesting conversation. It's like, if you're a great car yard, you've probably got a Hyundai, maybe you've got some sort of European mark like an Audi or something, and maybe you've got like some really high-end, I don't know, Ferrari as an example. And they're going to start in the Hyundai, and then they ultimately go and they buy the Toyota or whatever, and then they end up buying the really nice European car, and then they step up into the Ferrari as the weekend or on the Sunday, right? But that's an interesting thing, is that like learn how to actually work the trade-ins about the lifetime value of your customers, right? Which is a really important mechanism.
And I've always heard you, I mean, you've said that for a long time now, Josh. Like, if you want to grow your business every single time, I think it's always great to reflect heavily on your business twice per year, one for the new financial year and mid-year to actually take stock. But you've always said, if you want to grow your business in this coming year, there's only a couple of things that we can do. Number one, we can increase volume. Number two, we can increase sale price. Or number three, we can just increase our fee. Now, largely, it's not that easy just to say, look, I'm charging 2%, I'm just overnight going to go to 3% in my marketplace. But I've got to look at, is it volume? Is it sale price? Is it fee? And how can I go about generating that?
It's an interesting conversation, like, because you and I have both come through that school about really understanding like an Everest mission. So if we were going to go out there and we were going to go and climb a big mountain, then we'd actually have to have a plan on how we're going to go and do that. And it's exactly the same inside of any business, that we actually say, okay, the purpose of the company, the long and enduring purpose, is never going to be achieved. Like Nike, make people feel like they're an athlete when they put on their Nike gear. The mission is a really clear, specific set of numbers. So, okay, great, number of listings, number of sales, market share percentage, total size of vendor paid advertising per property, whatever those things might be. And then we then have the values, of the way that we actually go to play the game. And I think you've got some really clear values, like think like a customer, like that style of conversation, and work as a team and grow as a leader. And you start thinking about those three values. Okay, great. That actually guides behavior, so that when you actually don't have, for example, a set of rules, policies, or procedures around something, use those three values to actually guide decision-making, so decision-making can be done at speed. And then, if we're going to go and do this in terms of market penetration, in terms of number of listings and number of sales, then what are the specific strategies on how we're going to go and do that? Okay, great. So core area strategy, what are we going to do? We're going to send out an email every week with what's been listed and what's been sold. It's basically a CMA report, except it's now done weekly. And that actually goes to all of my previous market appraisals, and anyone that I meet in the street during the course of a campaign around 10-10-20, they're now going to go and get that email. The benefit for a seller in getting that email is that they're going to see what's new to market that's similar to theirs, what's new to market that they could upgrade into, what's actually being sold that's similar to theirs. It gives them an idea on what their place is worth, and what's being sold is something that they may have actually wished to pursue, and what did it actually make compared to the original quote. That's an example of strategy. We're going to go and do that. Tactically, we're going to go and do that. And then the measurement is what percentage of the homes in your area are actually receiving that particular report on a weekly basis. And so then all of a sudden you've actually just, that STM, strategy, tactics, measurement, you've actually got it. So how do we actually do that around here? And if it's not working, what do we do to adjust? Or if it is working, how do we go to amplify that to get that into the next core market that we're going to open into, because we've worked out that heaps of our sellers move to the next suburb when they aspirationally upgraded, and that's how we drag up average sale price over time. So Phil, your thoughts around that as a conversation to say, setting the mission. Most people tend to do it where they go incremental growth. Okay, great. So I did 20 transactions last year. Phil, you know what? I'm going out there, man. I'm going for 22 this year. And so it's like incremental, one little step. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a slow way to grow. Other people have said, okay, well, hang on a second, exponential growth. So I'm sitting at 30 transactions a year. I need someone in my team who can prospect, list, and sell. And if ultimately I can grow them to be a prospector and a lister and a seller, then that literally, then we could go to 60 transactions with that particular platform for growth. But I'm not going to put on a buyer's agent. I'm not going to put on a junior agent. I'm not going to put on an associate. I'm actually going to put someone on who's going to be a co-agent inside of my team. And the intent is that within a period of time, 6, 12, 18 months, I actually want them in the listing lounge room. And they're going to choose area, profile, demographic, type of property, whatever it is. And that's the sort of stuff that they're going to list, so I can elevate into higher price type property and not lose some of that great real estate that I started my career on, and still maintain and get them to move through. Thoughts on that as strategy and process?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. As I kind of alluded to before, I think it's really important for people to think in 3-year chunks. And I think, Josh, you're the one that maybe coined the phrase level 1, level 2, level 3 agents going back many years ago.
So Ivan Bresic days.
Yeah. So that was a key concept that I've really embraced inside our organisation ever since we started 14 years ago. So I think when people are starting to think about growth, yes, I get it. There are different marketplaces across Australia, but there are, I think you would agree, Josh, there are some pretty kind of universal laws around a real estate agent scaling their business, right? So let's say, for example, you're writing 300 grand today and you've got a goal, you want to get to $1 million over the next 3 years. There are some very, some consistent patterns and behaviours and some consistent employments that will be made over that 1 and 2 year and 3 year journey. You know,
so believe it or not, you're not the first person to do it.
I know.
There's actually some systems and some people that are in play, and if you just follow them, you can do it. And I'll say this to you: what is the difference between the person who writes 300 grand in fees and the person who writes $1 million? And in my mind, the person who writes $1 million provides $1 million worth of service and some. Right? So in order to provide $1 million worth of service, you are going to need a set of systems and you're going to need some people to help you to do that. Now, whether or not that's centralized infrastructure, like you guys have got some phenomenal marketing teams and admin teams and operational teams that helps a team to function, or whether or not it's someone who's going to literally help you to grow your number of open homes on a Saturday, you're going to need it. And I've got this bad thing in the training at the moment. I go, 1 open home, 2 open home, 3 open home, 4 open home, 5 open homes, grow a team and get some more. 6 open homes, 7 open homes, 8 open homes and 9, 10, 11 and 12, grow a team and take it to 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And you kind of get that idea that if some of the best agents in the country are doing 28 open for inspections on a Saturday, mate, they are not sitting in the lounge room guaranteeing they're going to be at that open house. So that business model breaks once you aim to get above 5 opens on a Saturday. Let's call that 50 transactions a year. So that's where you've got to realize is that don't get jealous that someone else has got a different business model. They just have that, but you've got to be really clear about what your model is.
I think, and that's what we're saying, Josh, is don't argue with these universal laws that work within the real estate space. But I think one of the key things I think for the guys to understand is that if you are looking at your business in a 3-year forward projections, the way I like to work with our team is to think about 2 things. Number one is you've got KPIs and metrics, so actual numbers. So in 3 years' time, let's just say that goal is to write $1 million. What does that look like in terms of listings, sales, and commission? So it's the million. How many listings and how many sales? So only 3 metrics. But then, what are the top 3 priorities in 3 years' time that would support that $1 million? So if you and I went into separate rooms with a whiteboard each and said, just describe, okay, with an average sale price of 700-800 grand, for me, if I'm at 300 grand today, and in 3 years' time I want my business to be at $1 million, what are those top 3 priorities that would need to be in place? Well, I'd probably be a 3-man team in 3 years' time. Number 2, I'd probably have a certain percentage of market share in my trading area. And number 3, there might be a skill base of a 9 out of 10 listing presentation or something like that, if that makes sense. So the guys can start to think about 3-year projection, where does it want to be in numbers, understand priorities. So what are those universal laws of stage 1, if I'm writing 300, stage 2 and stage 3, marry up those numbers, what are those priorities? And as you said perfectly well before, no matter what it is that you're aspiring to get to, somebody else has already walked that path. Simple process, implement those, get it documented to a 1-page plan to start with, and then build out some operations behind it.
So I love that because you then talk about getting really clear about the projects that you're going to need. So what are the projects that are ahead to do that? So maybe you've got to put some infrastructure in play. Maybe you're not using a CRM and you need to start getting your weekly email out and you haven't done that yet. Maybe you haven't really thought about what you're doing for your past client service experience. And that's a really important conversation because it drives referral network and a whole range of things and lifetime value of a customer. And then, getting a group of people around you as your execution team to make that happen. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about when you talk about quarterly projects, for a team, and or you talk about having an execution team around them, what do these things look like to help you to get to that Everest mission of that $1 million in this particular case?
Yeah, I think one of challenges with our real estate industry, Josh, is a lot of agents' self-esteem is based on how many properties they list and sell on a monthly basis, right? So if I've had a great month, I've listed and sold a lot, I wrote great comp, I feel really good about myself. Whereas the flip side of that, if I don't have a great month, then it's almost like I'm less of a human being because of the amount of properties that I sold. So I think one of the major shifts I see with agents that continually grow and continually do well is there's now a new mindset, which is, yes, I've got my day-to-day focus, which is I've got to list and sell as many as I possibly can. But on the second side is I want to make sure I wake up in 30 days' time or 90 days, let's talk about a quarterly priority, and go, have I actually got a better business than what I did 90 days ago.
Yeah.
So now we're working in this kind of two-speed economy, which is prospect, list and sell, one. But secondly is we're now starting to implement and build a better business along the way. So when you think about 90-day projects or priorities, as I would call them, everything needs to cascade. So where do I want to be in 3 years' time? Where do I want to be in 2 years' time? Where do I want to be in 1 year's time? So where am I aiming to be in 12 months' time? Now, my 90-day priorities are purely linked to where it is that I want to be in 1 year's time. So, for example, if I'm starting cold today and I've got a goal to put on a PA in 12 months' time, what would be some of the projects that would be linked to where I need to be, okay, for in 90 days' time? So one of those examples might be, and by the way, projects are not KPIs. So projects, Josh, are not, I want to make, 150 prospecting calls. No, this is separate to your day-to-day business, but these are projects that are going to actually improve you. So some examples of that might be, if you're listening to this today and you're starting fresh and you haven't got a great business plan in place, I'd say your project number one for the next 90 days would be to execute a world-class business plan. So get a copy of it from either Josh or from you or me or whoever, but that would be a project as an example for the next 90 days. If we get that in place, that's going to set us up for next phase moving forward.
And I love that whole idea, what's your item of value? So I build an item of value, better known as the daily email, and I've done that over the course of the last 15 years. Mate, there's 15,000 people that get a copy of that every day. We had to build that out and get that out the door. We were thinking about that, doing this podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast. That was a project, wasn't it, where you and I said, okay, great, we're going to do this, and we built it out. There's photography, there's back end, there's a whole range of things that needed to happen to actually get it to the point of execution. So that's a really interesting part because it then leads into meeting rhythms. And this is interesting because a meeting rhythm is designed to do a couple of things. It's one about consistency of conversation and also two, making sure that we're talking at the right level. So my favorite meeting rhythm, if you go to a great restaurant and you turn up early and you'll actually see that there'll be like the head chef, there'll be the head waiter, there'll be the head bar person, there'll be the head maitre d', whatever. And what those people will actually be doing is that they will actually be talking about what's on tonight. So we've got a special on the steak frites, we've got a special on the tiramisu, and off the back of that, we've got some salad martinis, and we're in a position that we've got some Hawkeys going out at $3.50 a can. And by the way, at 7 o'clock tonight, we've got the Harris team coming in for dinner, and at 9 p.m. tonight, we've got Phil bringing in his wife for a recommitment ceremony. Whatever the story is. So everyone in the restaurant knows what's going on. That today is like a daily directions meeting, and it starts every business day. Where are we at? What are we doing? Gets people focused. What are some other meeting rhythms that you're going to need to have to make sure that you keep your business plan on track? Really great conversation, this one. And my analogy for meeting rhythms, Josh, I think it's like when you take your kids bowling, you've got those on the side of the bowling alley, the bumpers so that the ball can't go down the gutter and it keeps you focused. So I think the key meeting rhythms for salespeople, particularly to master. So number one is that daily meeting, okay, where you basically what's up, where are you stuck, what needs to be done today, and there's a specific agenda for salespeople to follow. Then I would say that there is a weekly meeting that is slightly separate to that for a salesperson and their team. And from that perspective, there would be a little bit more reflection in that meeting on a weekly basis. So did we actually hit our KPIs for the week? What open homes have we got on the weekend? Where are we up? What have we got coming up on the listing radar and sales radar for the next 30 days, whatever it might be? So you've got your daily, you've got your weekly. Monthly meeting, once again, slight variation on the weekly as well. It's a little bit more review time in terms of how did the past month go? What's the next forward month looking like? I then move into a quarterly review, an extension of the monthly. So starting to review, how did we go over the last 90 days from both a KPIs and a projects perspective. So we're continually monitoring, did we actually hit our numbers? And secondly, have we actually improved the business? Because if we haven't improved the business, then we're not going to be able to get the scale to continue to grow. After the quarterly, I go 6 monthly, which is just a progression of the quarterlies. And then on top of that, then you start coming back to business planning. So I think that analogy, as I said... Just that annual piece, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what that meeting rhythms do is that's what holds you accountable to this business plan that we're talking about. So everything kind of all roads lead to one path, right? Which is we're just continually refining, staying on track by having those meeting rhythms in place.
And I love that conversation is to reflect, to project. And sometimes I take that and I take the weekly meeting and I break it a little differently. It's like, okay, great. Monday, I've got a great review on who my best buyers are in marketplace, who are bidding on the weekend. What does that look like? Who are our urgent buyers that need to buy? Who's sold on the weekend, which now means that they're cashed up and homeless, that we need to be putting into a different property. Tuesdays, that's my pipeline review. What am I doing with those potential sellers? How am I progressing them to market today? And Wednesday is my stock review day to go, okay, great. Where are we sitting with our current listings and what are we doing to make sure that we get them to sold? Now, the reason why I broke those up into shorter meetings as opposed to just one is that I found that some agents weren't paying homage to all of that stuff and were just like tick and flick and moving on, rather than actually saying, no, this actually needs proper strategic focus. So whatever your meeting rhythms are, it is up to you to determine those and to make sure that you actually go to the level that they allow you to operate at. So sometimes it's very much tactical day-to-day. Did you pull in the open for inspection signs from Jones Street? Right the way up to visionary of when do we put on our next team member and what would they be doing in terms of the functions and what job roles are you going to let go of and how does that change your remuneration schedule? So if you're thinking about that, like they're two different levels of thinking. Neither of them are wrong, by the way, because there's definitely every day you've got to be on that operational level, but you've got to be able to suck back up and get that overall historical horizon of focus to say, hey, overarching, geez, we're not actually getting market share on that. That's not actually working. We need to change that. Versus, okay, great, we're down here at today's day-to-day level.
And great little tip, I think you taught me this many years ago, Josh, is that, all the best agents I see around the country now, they've all got these daily meetings as all-day appointments in their diary. So you come into that quick daily huddle, you pull out your phone or your computer, wherever you are, you open it up, there's your agenda for Monday. Monday, this is my core focus, this is what we've got to talk about, as you said. Tuesdays, it might be more buyer-seller work. Wednesday might be whatever it is. So, yeah, great little tip.
Final principle today, stage, not age. And, Phil, this is one of my favorites, because we see some people that come into industry that are, 18, 19, 20, that have got a story that they're never going to make it until they're older. And also too, I've got people that are entering into industry. I've got a guy right now who has started out in regional Australia who's in a position that, I think he's entered the real estate industry at 55 and he's gone on to go and write $1 million in fees within 2 years. So, talk to us a little bit about stage not age and what you think about this as a principle.
I feel like I've been on both sides of the scale now, Josh. I remember when I first started at 20 years of age in real estate, I thought it was too young and I found it hard, and then I progressed quickly. And now it's 42. I don't know what that makes me old or middle-aged in the industry, but no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've all heard the analogy. I know plenty of people who kind of plateau in their career. They've been in real estate for 20 years. And the saying is, have you been in real estate 20 years or 1 year 20 times? I think that's a really great way of summarising it. But the reality is, I agree. It's whatever stage that you are at. Age is irrelevant. If you're there to serve, you can still do incredibly wonderful things.
I think this is a great conversation. The Jim Collins line keeps on haunting me all the time. What are you doing to be the best in the world at what you do? And then I then think about the Michael Jordan, quote, and he just says, how good are you at your job and what are you doing to be the best player in the game? And I think about that. Okay, great. So how good am I at my job? How good am I at my job? Okay, great. And what am I doing to be the best player in the game? Okay, yeah. And then I start thinking, okay, great. I got to read. I got to improve. I got to continue to grow. And ultimately, I don't worry about competition. I don't worry about insecurities and doubt and fear and age and profile and demographic. What I worry about is those two things. How do I actually make sure that I'm, doing a great job at what I do, and how do I become the best player in the game? And if you just think about those two key things, it changes everything in the way that you go to operate. Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
on Dream Big,
Move Fast.